Hey guys, this is James, and today we're going to be making a new backpack, trying to improve on the very first messenger backpack that I made. Trying to improve on that design. There were a few things that I wanted to make better. To start off with, I wanted to use a combination of two thicknesses of leather instead of just using one. You just saw me measure out right now the main body of the bag, which is made out of 2.5mm thick leather. And I am now drawing the sides of the bag out of 1.4mm leather. In terms of sizes, this is something I was asked a few times. Bear in mind that these sizes vary throughout the build, so these are the measurements that I went for, and here they are. I am using a front piece out of 2.5mm leather, which is roughly 37.5 centimeters long and 28 centimeters wide. The back piece, including a small area reserved for the flap, or the start of the flap that will be coming onto the front of the bag, is 57.5 centimeters long and again 28 centimeters wide. Whereas the depth of the bag is going to be determined by the sides, and the sides are again, so I made these 40 centimeters long with a slight curve or slight edge to them. You'll see what I mean by that. You can see it here actually when I'm dyeing the leather. So 40 centimeters long on one side and 35 centimeters on the other. I will be cutting up and doubling that side up. You'll see later on. Of course, the sides are also 15 centimeters wide, which makes the bag slightly less than, I would say, around 13 centimeters, I think, wide once it's all stitched up. You saw me dye the bag, or dye the pieces. I was using a combination of Fiebing's oil dye in walnut and pure alcohol that I got from, basically, this is just pure alcohol. It's made to dilute things. And I've tried this out. It works very well in terms of diluting the Fiebing's oil. If you want to do that as well, bear in mind that it does dry out the leather a lot. Now, this is an issue I've had throughout this process, throughout this build, and it has meant that the leather is a bit, I mean, it's showing more marks of use very fast in the early stages of use of the bag, and we'll see stretch marks, and we'll see marks where it's been folded, which shouldn't necessarily appear on this part of the build. And I do believe it's because the bag was used, because the leather wasn't treated with neat's foot oil enough early on in the first stages of the dyeing process, because in diluting the dye I ended up using a lot of different coats to try and get it as uniform as possible. Maybe too many coats, I think. So trying to get the color I wanted, I think that a darker dye may have been better than a walnut dye. So I'll carry on testing on further pieces later on in new videos, but in this video at least I decided to do it this way, and I'm very happy with the color I got, although I think, as I just said, that using a darker dye to start off with would have been the better choice, because I did find that leather dried out a lot very quickly. The straps, as you've seen, is a combination of the 1.4mm leather doubled up with a centerpiece made out of the 2.5mm leather in order to give it that kind of nice shape and rigidity. I'm just doing one side for now. I've clamped it between two bed slats here. These are just basic wooden slats from a bed, and I find that clamped down, these make excellent tools to have around your workshop in order to hold things down. Now, I know this is all very amateurish here. I'm just having fun with what I can get my hands on, and this is a very useful way of holding down long strips of leather, especially if you're doing a lot of strap work. As you can see, it's not moving at all. I've clamped it down all over the place, and I will also be using, just after this, the same mechanism in order to start getting that first sanded edge really nice and straight, or at least as straight as I possibly can. Once more, you're trying to go back and forwards, and those last holes get quite tough sometimes without using a pair of pliers. So here I am sanding, and bear in mind I'm only doing one half of one shoulder blade, or one strap. And it's already taken me a long time. I'm also using an improvised sanding block here, but it seemed to work quite well. And of course I'm getting leather bits all over me. sorry, I won't be showing you the whole sanding process of the 4 sides. I just want to show you one side, so make sure you bevel those edges first. Nice and rounded edges make for a really good looking strap. Get some more dye there. I'm showing you this process again. I know I've shown you this process before, but it's just a really satisfying process again to dye it. Once you've got those edges nicely done, you dye them, apply trag gum on it, or Arabic gum. At least that's what I use. Find out what you guys want to use. And this is one edge. You can compare it to the one on the other side, which isn't stitched, which is not dyed anything. And it gave me a very nice, satisfying edge for the straps. And I was quite happy with this. Very pleased with the result here. It wasn't perfectly straight, but hey, these are straps. No one really minds if they're not totally straight, as long as they're comfortable and hold well. This is the front pocket. Now, I didn't mention the front pocket in terms of size. It's going to be 37.5 centimeters long and 28, sorry, I'm getting my measurements mixed up. I believe I made it 20 centimeters tall and 28 centimeters wide, if I'm not mistaken. I decided to go for an interesting little cut here, just to give it some dynamic flow, lines, interesting visual lines going across the bag. And obviously, because I won't be able to access this later, this is when you need to burnish things. When you are building something, always think of the edges at every step of the process. Are there any edges that you will not be able to access later on? If there are, those are edges you want to burnish early. You can easily come back and burnish exposed edges at any point of the process, but edges that will be touching another surface may be very tough to get to. So again, this is going to be essential. Now, right now I'm burnishing another piece, which I believe, actually I can't remember what this piece is. Oh gosh, this is awkward. I think this is the flap. I'm not totally convinced what piece this is. Unless it's the front. Yeah, it must have been the front of the piece, which will be going on. Yeah, that's it. It's the front of the piece. This is the bottom of the piece. Again, the back goes from the bottom and slopes all the way around into the back and becomes the flap. And I really like the idea of having one nice piece of leather going all the way around. If I ever get my hands on a piece of leather that is big enough, I will definitely try and do that. And the first test fit here, just to show you the front of the bag. So I have got the flap and the front of the bag, sorry, not the flap, the front pocket and the front of the interior pocket shaped the same way, with the same measurements to give it, again, that nice look and feel. I am now ready to start gluing the back and front together. I did this in the previous messenger bag. I'm just checking for fit, I'm just checking for distance, marking where I want my different glue edges to go, just making sure I don't put glue too far onto the piece of leather. I don't want that to show. And I did this in the previous build, and I did this in this build, and I have to say this is a technique that I really like. I find it gives it a really nice solid bottom to the bag, where you've got a double layer of leather here, 2.5 millimeters times 2, basically, so 5 millimeters of leather in the bottom, plus the sides, and you'll see that I will actually reinforce the bottom of the sides to make it really sturdy, and this gives it a very nice strong frame in a sort of way, with a lot of leather holding it together at the bottom, making sure it doesn't move. And you can see my stitching is not perfect, but hey, this is the bottom of the bag, so it will do. I've actually discovered a nice little tip, or had been given a nice little tip off the internet on Reddit by someone who was saying, stop using an edge guide to mark your lines all around the edges. Instead, just go for a ruler if you can. Place a ruler down, mark that, and that will give you a really nice straight edge. And that's what I did here, or at least tried to. I will be using a edge guider later on, and you'll see what I mean. Some people use a compass for that to guide along the edges. Again, back with the pint glasses, and we're now taking care of those edges. The side flaps here, which I will be reinforcing later on. At this point, I hadn't decided on what I wanted to do. So you can see here the nice swoop, or the nice angle that I'm giving it, and I'm doubling this up. The blue line down the middle of that is where I will be cutting it and stitching it to make a nice little flap that will naturally want to pull the bag closed and make sure that nothing can get in or out of that bag when it's closed. And that really does help reinforce it. Make sure that when you're sticking things together, always tap them down with a hammer, and this helps bind the different surfaces together, make sure the glue gets all over the place, and make sure the fibers start binding together. Again, sanding. I feel like half of the time I spend doing anything is going to be sanding, and the other half is going to be sewing. It's ridiculous how much sanding gets done on these pieces. I will be going into more detail in a minute here about my edge processes here, my burnishing process, because I find that burnishing is an interesting thing for me. It's a bit of a dilemma for me where I don't know where to stop. I feel like the more burnishing you do, the better it is. But at the same time, when is too much burnishing too much? So, I mean, I will go into detail about my process in a second, and I would love to hear your thoughts, guys, about how you do it. But right now, we're watching me cut down the centerpiece here, and these will be sewn inwards. We are now looking at the handle, and I was quite pleased with my handle here. I decided to double it up, and I skived off a bit of the leather at the end of the bottom piece that was then glued on. You can see me, I've glued it on and stitched it, as well as burnished all the edges, and I'm quite happy with the result. That's the underside there, so it's not looking as good as the top side, but it does give you a really nice solid handle you can grab onto on the top, and you'll see what I'm doing. The whole closing mechanism and handle is incorporated into one, so from the outside it looks like one strip of leather going all the way down, and the handle will also be the closing mechanism, or will be attached to the closing mechanism slightly lower down onto the bag. And at the bottom of the bag, another strap will have this ring that we're looking at right now, onto which the closing mechanism will latch, and which will enable you to make sure your bag stays closed. Again, very pleased with my burnishing here. I actually used the 2.5mm leather as well as a strip of 1.4mm leather for the bottom strap, just to make sure it was nice and rigid. I'm in the process of making sure of sewing the front pocket to the front of the bag, and to do this I marked where my start and finish holes would be and tried to get the same holes on both sides. I find that this avoids me having to glue it down if I possibly can. It does make the process a bit awkward, especially if you're not sure you're getting your line straight, but in this case my lines were much straighter for the front pocket, as you can see, than the back and front sides attached just beneath. Yeah, whatever. The line is very... I like the line. It's nice and straight. It's not perfect, but it's nice. I've also taken this time to attach the back straps onto the bag, and these are the mechanisms that will be enabling the user to adjust the straps. And I haven't shown you everything here. I have attached the straps to the back, and I'm in the process of marking all these holes, or making all these holes, and you saw me use the edge guide to scribe a line down the leather there. Again, the edge guide or the ruler would work just as well, but the ruler, I find, for long distances like this doesn't enable me to get such a straight line, or at least as consistent along the edge as that. I may be speeding up the process in a second here, so we may skip things, but any second now we'll be looking at the sides, if I'm not mistaken, and you'll see that I decided to add on... So my sides are made out of 1.4mm leather. I think I've said this already, and this gives the bag just the extra flexibility that the previous bag lacked, and I decided to add onto that an extra piece of 2.5mm leather. You can see my stitching here on the sides will enable me to make sure the bag stays nice and closed, nice and tight, and doesn't flip-flop all around the place, which I really like. And that bottom reinforced part will give it a really nice, strong, sturdy bottom deep part to the bag, and that will really help it stay nice and firm. So I've skipped forwards again. I've already now sewn one side of the bag on, and I am marking where I want my straps to go. Very important process. And here is the bag. So I've actually moved forwards a lot. So you can see the front flap is now actually on, and I decided to go for an interesting symmetry here with the front flap, I can't speak anymore, as well as the inside pockets. You can see that there is a very similar design going on there, and you can see how it opens up and how the sides will go inwards there with that cutout flap, which I really like, and the mechanism, the closing mechanism, which I used again. I've sourced this online, and you guys can, it's relatively easy to find it in construction work. If you're working with chains and things like that in construction work, you'll be able to find these quite easily, so you can now see how the closing works and how the handle is incorporated into the closing mechanism. I'm going to take some time now to look at the sides and the bevel and the burnishing process that I've used. So you can see now the sides are very raw and have not been burnished. I've now sanded them, and I've now dyed the sides. They have not yet been burnished, but just to show you my process, I try and sand as close as possible so that all the different surfaces and layers of leather are actually at the same level. It's not perfect in these shots. It really isn't perfect here. Try and get it as perfect as you possibly can, and I'll make sure that the edges are as beautiful and gorgeous as you can. I've already burnished it once. You can see the burnishing here, and once I've burnished it, I like to actually scrape off a layer of burnishing, as you can see on the right hand side, with some sandpaper. And the reason I do this is to enable me to then burnish it a second time. And this is what I want your opinion on. I stumbled upon this technique by pure chance, because I wasn't happy with the burnishing of a piece, so I took it all off and started again, and realized that my second burnishing process, once I'd done this, my second round of burnishing actually gave me a really nice, much more pleasing edge, and I'll tell you my thoughts on this. Now, by doing this, I believe I am taking away the small bits of grain and whatever that's left over from the first burnishing process, but not taking away the base structure of the leather, which has been impregnated with the trag gum, and I think that this is enabling me to get a very nice silky smooth finish, but also open up the pores once more to accept a second layer of gum trag. Again, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I found that by doing this, even though it's very labor intensive, actually destroying your work and then starting again to some extent, because you're not destroying it 100%, you're just taking off a top layer, but actually by destroying your work and starting again, I find that I get a really consistent burnish throughout. Neat's foot oil is desperately needed at this point. The bag has been very dried out by the dyeing process. I did give it a coat of neat's foot oil, a very thorough coat of neat's foot oil, actually, to be completely frank, and yet I still found that it was desperately needing more. I don't know if that was just being used or being tooled so often, or just being handled so often, or I don't know if it's due to dryness in the place I'm working here. I've got no idea what it's from, but I find that this leather in particular was just drinking that neat's foot oil in no time. So give us a few coats of neat's foot oil, and then I will varnish it. And this time for varnishing, I decided to go for some clear coated, some transparent or some non-colored shoe polish. Again, the shoe polish, and I find that it really works well. So you can see me burnish one more here after I've given it the neat's foot oil coating. It's simply because I found that the sides were very dry again. And here we go in all its glory with that two coats actually of shoe polish, and I'm very happy with the result. It's not perfect, it's got loads of issues. You can see where the flap has been folded, and that's going to have a nice little mark build throughout the years, but hey, it works well. And this is actually going to a friend of mine who's in medical work, and he'll be using it to transport his stuff, so I'm quite happy knowing that it will be used for something very useful, basically, and hopefully it will last him for donkey's years. So there we go, I'm very happy with that result. Again, I'm loving the closing mechanism. I've been using the previous bag for the last 2 or 3 months now, and absolutely love that closing mechanism. It is so practical. It can be opened very fast. You can see the way that the flaps actually have that reinforcement, which looks really nice, the bitonal leather there, which just accents the burnishings very well. So there you go, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed. Do tell me in the comments what you thought about this video, and make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and I will see you very soon for some more leatherworks. My name is James, signing off.